Dear viewer, thank you so much for watching our English program. Today we are going to discuss about Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Joining me today are Lassisi, an expert in security risk management, intelligence politics, and defense, and Dr. Monty MC Mochi from the American Liberal Arts University in Congo, UC. Both of you, thank you for your time. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have decided to leave ECOWAS after more than 47 years of membership. What are your thoughts?
Why do they leave? They left because of their own sovereignty. First, sovereignty. Second, national interest. 3, geopolitics. People seem to forget the geopolitics of the Sahel region. It's about the economics of politics and the politics of economics. It's economics of politics and politics of economics. That's what's happening in Sahel now. And that's why everybody is clamoring about the national interest. They're talking about national interest. And they have to like romance those who protect their national interest. For the entire memorial, those 3 countries, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, they have been with their colonial masters, the French. So, and you could see, without minimizing worry, you can see that what is going on in those regions are not something people of those regions really can how would I put it? Proud of. They can't proud of that. So the so-called associations with their colonial masters. So these guys now, despite the fact we can argue the way and manner they came into power, which is true, cool, but they are not trying to make or to hold the bull by the horn in the name of national interest. That is fundamental issues. The fundamental issues are about sovereignty, the national interest, and the politics of economics and economics of politics. First, let me put it this way. First, the sovereignty. The constitution that established ECOWAS made it so clear that the ECOWAS should not intervene in the internal affairs of the member states. That is what those 3 countries pinned their withdrawal on. Sovereignty. Sovereignty. Second, the national interest. The national interest, if you look at the whole region, as I was saying the other time about the past colonial masters and the recent emergence of the Russia by proxy in those regions, the emergence of the new power in Sahel, whether we want to like it or not, by proxy, the Russians are there. And that leads to economics of politics and politics of economics of geopolitics in that area. So we have to look at the fundamentals. What gave rise to this? Did they just wake up one day and say they are leaving the ECOWAS? No. First, the so-called political leaders made a mockery of democracy in those three countries. Let's be realistic. I'm not in support of coup. I always talk against coup. But sometimes in geopolitics, they say one man freedom fighter is another man what? It's another man terrorist. So now leave us to the security implication in the Sahel region and the entire Africa, not talk of the West Africa as a whole. Strategically, if you look at the position of Niger with Nigeria, the border is so porous. That porous border. So if you are talking about security implication in that area, in that context, we are looking at something not looking good, not looking so good, the nearest future. In the nearest future, nothing looks so good. So we have to first attack the fundamental, the issues. Why did they leave? Before we talk about the other things.
Dr. Monty, those countries claim that their sovereignty is under threat, leading them to exit ECOWAS, where they have been for decades. How might this decision impact their security?
I find it very, very interesting that these three nation states have elected to withdraw, notwithstanding that their elected governance structure has been overthrown via a military coup, which creates, for me, certain issues. And I am trying to understand what is the underlying reason. Are these three states acting in the best interest of security, or is it perhaps personal interest, or is it perhaps their inability to control their social publics within each of these three states? And time will tell as to what actually transpires. But ECOWAS has been around for several decades, and no institution or association is perfect. However, ECOWAS has done what I consider to be several significant positives, particularly in, say, Liberia, where they played an instrumental role during the various intersections. And now Liberia has evolved into a semi-stable nation state, notwithstanding that their economics is severely constrained. But they did have a successful election where the previous incumbent stood down as a result of the poll, which was of positive significance.
Is it this situation comparable to ECOWAS intervention in Liberia and Gambia?
Not really. If you look at what they base their withdrawal from, is about the economic sanctions. The economic sanction and the adding of the ECOWAS to their own submissions, to their own ways, to their own objectives, their own reason of like, okay, this is what you want to do. We're handing over. These three countries, if we're talking about all of them, they have transition program. They have made out their transition program known to people. Now, when are they leaving? Do they have clearly defined limits, clearly defined tenure? They leaving next year, this year, or in the next 2 years? These are things that we should put in consideration. Are they leaving now? Are they leaving next year? Do you have practicable and doable transition program? Are they going to hand over to the democratic elected president? So give them that opportunity. Let them tailor their different countries to transition programs. Okay, we are going to hand over. Let's say, okay, this is my timetable. I'm handing over next year. This is my timetable. I'm handing over December. If they now go beyond that, now that is another entirely. Now that's another campaign. We are now talking in the context of Yahya Jammeh of Gambia. He conducted an election and he went beyond. He lost the election. And he refused to hand over. That is quite different entirely. And don't forget that, the ECOWAS was invited. Not that they just intervened, they were invited. So these are two different scenarios entirely. So you need to give these guys time, okay, like the Burkina Faso. when I'm handing over so time. But if it goes beyond that, now you can ask, oh no, you want to stay in power forever. No. But let's look at it strategically. In my village, I'm sorry to say this, they say you don't throw away the bad child with the water. You don't sorry for my African proverb. You don't throw away the bad child. Yeah, you don't throw away the bad child with the water because the child is bad, so you can just throw the child. No, you don't do that. What ECOWAS has done now, those guys, they are now what do I call it? They are orphans. They have their rights now, so they can choose where to go to and where to romance. They can choose, look, you know what? Okay, ECOWAS, you have betrayed us, you have done this to us, we are going towards this. Will you blame them? No. And each of those, yes, and each of those countries, let's don't forget that each of those countries, they are fighting internal security problem, internal security crisis, the jihads in those countries. They are fighting them, the domestic terrorism. So that's why we call about that. That's where the national interest comes in here. Are we protecting the national interest? Are we just saying, okay, we are ECOWAS, we are African Union, we cannot just protect our own? No, shouldn't be that. Shouldn't be that. Let's call a spade a spade. Shouldn't be that.
Dr. Monti, ECOWAS is accusing Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger of undermining democratically elected governments. Despite this, they claim they have a support from their citizens. How could this affect the economy, given ECOWAS history of facilitating free movement and business development in the region?
I consider that to be insufficient reasoning. I consider that to be self-centered in terms of the military coup leadership, that they are not willing to compromise. In a sense, if they continue to participate within ECOWAS, that's going to raise issues among the people. Why don't you not lead by example in terms of standing down and allowing a duly constituted civil society be constructed, whether through an election or some other instrument? So for them, it was basically they wanted to sever any semblance of civic responsibility among their peoples. So that is in a sense of self-ego, personal power holding, which to me is unacceptable. And it further deconstructs African civics, because African civics are roiling, and it's to do with a great deal of economics being primarily situated among the very few, and the majority of citizens are lacking fundamental state supplied resources. And so this is an area, these three states are not what I call strong prior to the coup, because they are suffering from insurgents in terms of radicalization, that education is not deemed to be a positive. And I don't profess to have particularly inside information or any insights as to what the coup illustrates, other than that it just illustrates completely the weakness of civil infrastructure, which needs to be controlled. And ECOWAS could have provided a positive veil, and they did not wish to compromise, or more importantly, they did not wish to start to speak up. Why did they have this coup when ECOWAS putatively represents democracy by the people and for the people within a realm of legal infrastructure, non-arbitrary and subject to controls?
The Sahel region face challenge from armed group. With nations now divided, how can they fight?
Let's take Niger and Nigeria. Niger and Nigeria. Presently, they have what they call joint task force, joint task force on terrorism. Now, do you think this will continue with it, with this withdrawal? They are no longer friendly neighbors. So how would they be able to to coordinate joint task force on terrorism? And in the Chad, in the J, in that area, we have the activities, predominantly the activities of the Boko Haram, the terrorist group. And these people are like between the border trying to fight the two, Niger Republic and Nigeria, that try to come together, do the proper fight against terrorism, and they are become pulling resources together, join patrol, fighting terrorism. But now it's not going to be like that again. It's not going to be like this. That's have a huge security implication among the member states. Among the member states, and each, like I mentioned earlier, each of these countries are fighting internal terrorism, what they call domestic terrorism. Each of them. And now, if you look at Mali, Burkina Faso, they have the foreign mercenaries fighting for them. You have the foreign mercenaries. The foreign mercenaries, that's why I call them the proxy, the Russian in proxy. Now, it is expected that Niger will embrace the same approach. And that is where the economy for politics and politics of economy comes in geopolitics. Because why the French is say bye-bye, when the French is say bye-bye, goodbye, they are welcoming the other states. Russia is coming in proxy. We might not want to talk about it, but it is what is happening. They are there, they're on ground.
Dr. Monti, the alliance of Sahel is turning to partnership with Russia and China due to disappointment with the UN peacekeeping mission and France intervention. How should this situation be handled?
It puts each of these three states in a very vulnerable position, very fragile, requiring sadly the use of blunt force, which in the long term provides very little success. It's only short term, and all it does is inspire insurrection. It inspires a vitriol, and therefore they need to seek external assistance. And I strongly suspect the West would not be amenable unless certain protocols were adhered to which the military junta would not agree. Hence, they are looking towards Moscow. And Moscow is a short-term palliative. Moscow will not provide long-term trenching in values which are epistemically sound and will encourage civil flourishing. Do these three states, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, are their governments duly constituted, i.e., reflecting the will and the wish of the people? I strongly suspect not. So their legitimacy is extremely weak. And for them to suggest, or the military junta to suggest, we are acting in the interest of the people and we are self-preserving our state, we want to be not violated, is truly pushing what I call reasonable logic. It doesn't cut both ways. You need to have the people supporting you, and that can be conducted through, I suspect, an election that they are loath to have. Burkina Faso was to have elections, I believe, last year. They still haven't happened because of the internal roiling or the internal fragility. And so they're acting in terms of personal self-interest, not in the interest of their nation state.
ECOWAS primarily is about the development of the member states economically. Primarily, it's about the development, the growth of the member states. And the fact that they have been trying to do the free trade between the member states, the free trade movement among the member states, this is a blow to that objective. It is a blow to that policy. Because now, as a Nigerian, As a Nigerian, I can't hold my passport to travel to Mali again. Do you know what I'm saying? Before, I don't need a visa to enter Mali to do what I want to do. But now, I will need a visa to go to enter Mali. I will need a visa to enter Niger, my neighbor here. I will need a visa to go to Burkina Faso. So the implication is so huge. It's a collateral damage to the so-called policy, our free trade policy, ECOWAS trade for politics. So that's why I say these things are in the initial stage, these things were not well handled. You don't throw away the bad child like that. You just to give them time, listening ears. Okay, this is what you wanted to do. Okay, this is what you want. Okay, let's meet. Politics is about compromise, diplomacy. Everything should not be about war, 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 war. Let's jaw. Let's jaw. It's not about war, war, war. Let's jaw. By doing that, you come back to the negotiation table. Okay, this is what I want to do. This is what you want to do. Okay, let's do it together. Not that everything's about militarization. No. Militarization will never give you the outcome of what you really wanted to achieve. Over militarization of ECOWAS. No, you can't do that. Some people, I read some opinions, some people are saying, let them go because how much? If they leave, if one member leaves, let's assume, okay, if one member leaves in ECOWAS, it affects the other 14. Not talk of when the three left. When three left, and those three are strategically partners, if you look at them, geopolitically, if you look at them, they are partners, and three of them left, there's going to be a fallout. Mind you, there's going to be a fallout. Guinea is watching. There's going to be a fallout because this thing is contagious. It's contagious because you will see, like, okay, my neighbor has left. What is left for me? My neighbor has left this community. What is left for me? Okay, this is my trading partner. Now I can't trade my trade partner because he has left ECOWAS. So that means I have to leave ECOWAS too. So I can trade with my partner. So it has a ripple effect on the economic activities of ECOWAS. I hope President Bola Tinubu, who is the current chairman, will sit down in a round table with these guys. Maybe it's never too late and advise them to come back.
Dr. Monty, those countries claim that their sovereignty is under threat, leading them to exit ECOWAS, where they have been for decades. How might this decision impact their security?
Unfortunately, the argument advanced is not sound. I don't accept the argument in terms of state security because they're looking for the wrong question, and the answer that they're going to receive may not be in their best interest. Unfortunately, the institutions in each of these three countries, and I mean by the public administrative institution, the institution that promotes education, and the institution that promotes the rule of law, non-arbitrary, independent, conjunctive in terms of what I call competence, is quite fragile in each of these three states. And the coup further weakens or diminishes what I call state or citizen responsibility. And in the long term, I unfortunately am not optimistic. And by rejecting ECOWAS, these three states have elected to go short term and are hoping that someone will bail them out. Unfortunately, the West is involved in many other aspects, whether it be Ukraine, Gaza, and other elements of Africa, and resources are extremely stretched. And also, the people that are on the ground or providing advice are very few and far between. And it just makes the problem more insurmountable. And sadly, those that are suffering are those who lack the voice, the young children, the women, and of course, hunger and poverty in terms of natural consumption is further weakening the social fabric. And it's almost a form of what I call spiraling. It's going to become faster and faster and faster, creating more and more potential for external insurgents who tend to be very myopic. And I could be referring to Boko Haram. So northwestern or northeastern Nigeria is also quite fragile because the state of Nigeria is very weak, especially when you get into the regions that are approaching the Sahel, these three states. And that also adds or exacerbates the issue. And I'm just speaking right now, someone who knows a little, primarily based on my past series of experiences over many, many decades. But it goes down to similar problems. You need to develop the social human fabric, the strong citizen who is critically independent, who is strong because he's been well nourished, which involves agriculture, which involves that the state acts as a servant to the people and that governance is a servant. It's not too much new. It's been written about many, many times. And the people know, but unfortunately, those that have the levers of power are very short term and they're into what I call personal satisfaction. And sadly, it results in the diminishing of administrative infrastructure.
Those three nations claim to have the support of their citizens.
Every uh, every region, every region has the right, or now they are championing they are championing a new course towards a better future. Let me put it that way. Every region in Africa, if we divide Africa now, if you see them, especially the Sahel. Last year I wrote something about them. I call them the emerging factor of the Sahel. I never, and I foresaw this. I said the emerging power of the Sahel, and these are Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea. Like these guys have enormous support of the East. They have the enormous support of the East. So why the ECOWAS or the African Union there bringing sanctions upon sanctions, sanctions upon sanctions? We have seen history is there. Sanction will never work. It will never work. It can only worsen the situation. It will never work. Let's go outside Africa. The Russia-Ukraine war is still on. Despite all the sanction on Russia, sanction will never work. You still have some countries that will still go back through the back door to trade with you, to render those sanctions useless. And that's what is happening right now. And the same thing is repeating itself in ECOWAS. So they did not, the ECOWAS authority did not handle that case at the initial stage very well with the what I call stick and carrot approach. That should have been the best stick and carrot approach. You just don't go out there with the stick alone. You have to go with the carrot. You have to go with the carrot. Not everything sanctions upon sanctions upon sanctions. At the end of the day, this guy will turn back and like, no, enough is enough. Enough is enough. So with this alone, I was discussing with my colleague in the office before this interview that ECOWAS is fast becoming a toothless bulldog with this action, with this singular action. ECOWAS is fast becoming a toothless bulldog. Why Africa Union has been so laid back. And this will have a ripple effect, serious effect on other member states, not talk of outside West Africa. outside West Africa because people are watching. They want to see the reaction of this. They want to see how ECOWAS will handle this withdrawal.
How will this decision continue to affect citizens within those three states?
If you're referring to these three states' economy, it's only going to have a negative effect. And the damage is going to be multi-generational. And that is the sad, tragic history of sub-Saharan Africa, and to an extent, MENA, Middle East and Northern Africa. And it's distilled into governance is in service. Governance ideally is constructed or crafted by people who have long-term interests and are willing to respect and abide by their independent internal constitution and stand down as required. Unfortunately, that is not happening. So it's knee-jerk, knee-jerk, knee-jerk. And the collateralization is running through all of Africa. So it does impinge indirectly many other nation states, whether it be Congo, Zimbabwe, or even South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, Kenya. The fragility is existent, and that is the bane, because the intellectual capital in Africa is equivalent to that of any other region, North America, Europe, Australia. There is no difference. The difference is that who is going to seize the lineaments of power. And power is actually not to preserve oneself, but power is to be used judiciously. And it requires individuals who recognize service, service, service. Service long-term, open and transparent, that material gains are all objectified, allowing for what I call personal and state security. And if done, the results will be manifold. I don't see it happening in the short term. So what it's what I call the vicious economic cycle. And it's going to be happening again. I am not optimistic. And right now, the UN has been shown to be a flawed instrument, as it has been for many, many decades. But what is the alternative? So you work with the institutions that you have now, and you try to bring in what I call people of decency. They should be speaking truth to power grounded in evidence, but it becomes more and more what I call an old men's club. There are very few women in the club because there are not very many women, if any, who are heads of government. And unfortunately, even SADC, when they are election tourists, they don't do what they need to do because it could happen to them. So basically, it's status quo reinforcement. And that needs to change. It needs to be changed in a swoop, transformative versus transactional. And that can be done through a strong, rigorous education system, substantively funded by the state, which poses many issues because those are resources going out into human capital, not into the pockets of the elite. So they're very reluctant. The same equivalency for healthcare and for nutrition. And unless that is radically modified, I don't see or anticipate very much change. But there are people, and these people who are involved in empowerment, and I include people like you in the media, because you have a very vital, important role. And I suspect a strong media, they're not welcomed by governments, more or less. They may pay lip service, but you know that you're striking when you are being pushed back, whether direct or indirect, because your truth intimidates. And that is what people need. They need truth grounded in evidence. So you in the media, and I say this generally, are a very vital pillar, a very vital tier, and require support, whether it be internal or external. And that is part of the tragedy. I see it happening in Europe. I see it happening in North America, where the media is becoming distorted, and what is real news as opposed to what they say fake news. And the powers that are pushing back are becoming extremely toxic. So it's becoming a universal norm. Africa is not unique. Blame Africa. Look at these poor Africans. And I say, absolutely not. Look at a mirror and you see yourself. And that's why Joseph Conrad, in his seminal book, The Heart of Darkness, the horror, the horror, the horror at the very end, because it was the Western man looking back at himself and he saw the mirror reflection. And Congo, or the old Congo, was merely the instrument illustrating what I call moral, social, civic repression.
Mr. Lassasi, what potential solution do you see for this crisis?
The solution is about leadership. Everything that is going on here is leadership. The solution is leadership. Well, I have three solutions: leadership, leadership, and leadership. When we get that right in Africa, we are good to go. Not only in West Africa. Leadership, leadership, and leadership. Poor leadership brought those countries to where they are now. Poor leadership brought them to where they are now. So once that is handled, Africa is ready to go. We have gone past the era of telling the whole world how Europe underdeveloped Africa. Apologies to Rodney. It is now how Africa have been underdeveloping Africa by the so-called leaders, the impostors, the so-called leaders, underdeveloping Africa. So we have to take the mantle by like, okay, this is what you want to do. When you can do that right, charity begins at home. Charity begins at home. When you do that right, people outside there will take it seriously. Leadership first.
Dr. Monti and Mr. Lassasi, thank you for sharing your insight. We believe our viewer will appreciate your analysis. We hope to have you next time. Dear viewer, thank you for watching. Please subscribe and share in our next program. Goodbye for now.